Boom! Beat drops. Welcome into the Wolves Den. I'm your host, Jay Burr. Got a special guest joining us here in just a minute. My buddy, known him for a long time, ride or die, JC with the Red Wolf roll call. We're just going to keep it clean today, though, RWRC. We'll bring him in here in just a minute. But unfortunately, we're going to have to recap last week because that's what we do here. And I tried to tell you guys last week. I did. It's tough to go to Louisiana and win a game. There you see it. Taking on the Raging Cajuns. Arkansas State. I mean, if you liked offense in this one, it was going. In fact, early on, I believe this is the third play from scrimmage even, and Elijah Mitchell, 64 yards later, he hits pay dirt, and we're not even 2 minutes into this thing, and it's already 7-0. But Arkansas State would answer back. You see the diminutive demon there, Warren Wan, ties things up. He would have him a pretty solid day as well. But the Raging Cajuns, man, they kept it rolling all day. You see an interception there, Brandon Bynum, one of the few bright spots, kind of sort of for the defense in this one. But later in this one, you know, it was just a lot of that all day. Just big plays for Louisiana, but a lot of big plays for Arkansas State as well. Elijah Mitchell scored there. You see Marcel Murray doing what Marcel Murray does, grinding, pounding guys out. This kid is going to be fabulous to watch as the years roll on. He would actually tie things up at 14 right there. And then another big play. Here you see zone read right up the gut, and everybody is just chasing down Raymond Calais. He had him a day. I believe he had 7 carries, over 120 yards, so average is looking pretty good there. Andre Nunez, not known for running, but 1 yard out, not too bad. Game was kind of slipping away at that point, but Justice Hansen would answer 28-21. We're not even through the first half at this point here. Marcel Murray bulldozing folks in there. That would make the score 34-28. Louisiana still leading right there. And then Jerry Jacobs, he is second in the league in interceptions. Athletic right there. And then Arkansas State would answer right back after that one. Kirk Merritt finally broke open. That was a 73-yard touchdown pass. Arkansas State actually took the lead at that point. But in this game, and this one right here was a dagger. That was a 3rd and long play for them. Gerard Jackson, 53 yards later, gets it. The 2-point conversion would fail, so that would make things a little interesting. But Marcel Murray, man, he is just hauling dudes around. Arkansas State retakes the lead at that point, 43-40. They would get the 2-point conversion. You're going to see it right here. Warren Wan on the outside. You gotta account for that guy. But unfortunately, a good kick return, and then just Raging Cajuns grind it out, and then boom, there you see it. Trey Regis with the 2-yard run. That would be the dagger in this one. Go ahead and throw the stats up there for me, guys. We got a little bit to digest here. A lot of offense, so if you like it, there it is. Arkansas State with 478 yards. ULL over 500 yards. You see 319 yards passing, 228 yards rushing. You see the numbers there for Arkansas State. Third downs for both these teams. Pretty good if you're on offense, pretty lousy if you're on defense. We talked about that this past week. Yards per play, that's something that we brought up a few weeks ago. If there's about a 2-yard differential, chances are you're not winning that game if you're on the other side of it. Yards per play there, lots of them, big plays you saw there for Arkansas State. They had 5 of over 20 yards, not bad. Louisiana, well, there you see it. They had 8, and 4 of those went for touchdowns. That was the deal breaker. Penalties, we brought it up last week. It really was kind of a non-factor except for one there for Arkansas State. It was late in the first half. Coach Blake Anderson not happy about what was a pretty obvious pass interference call. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't called. That would tack on the 15, led to a field goal in this one. It could have changed the complex of the game. Not to say that he directly led to 3 points, but, you know, it is what it is. Throw up the standings there for me, guys. We'll kind of see where we're at currently because we are in kind of knee-deep into the season here. You see the 2 Louisianas there sitting at 2-2 apiece, 4-4 overall. Arkansas State 1-3, surprisingly a 1-3, 4-4 overall, however. And then South Alabama, next week's opponent. We'll talk about them here in a second. And then Texas State bringing up the rear. And this is just the Western Division, so not completely out of things yet, but it's not looking good. Let's go ahead and bring in JC here. And my man, I know you're knee deep with this team all the time. You're always tweeting out about practice reports and everything like that. I mean, it's kind of hard, I think, for a lot of us to sort of wrap our heads around how this season has gone. I guess in a nutshell, and we'll touch on the game here in a second, just what is going on? I know some injuries have piled up a little bit for them, but it just seems something is off. Something's not the same as what it was.
It just seems like to me, I just think back to spring. I think back to fall camp, the beginning of it, and then, as you roll through and you start the season with SEMO, and then you head to Alabama, and we all know what happened there. But it seems to me that you're halfway through the conference season and you're still trying to figure things out. And with most teams, you can't do that. You cannot be that far into the season and still trying to figure things out. One of the things, in my opinion, that I've noticed, and I don't know if it's right, I don't know if it's accurate, but for the longest time with Arkansas State, you knew who the leaders were. I mean,
right.
It went without saying. And when I say leaders, I mean vocally. If they need to get a hold of somebody, get somebody's attention, call somebody out, you knew who those guys would be. With this team, the leaders on this team are not traditionally vocal guys. This is just not who they are. And, quarterback Justice Hansen, he's more of a quiet guy. Warren Wong, he's more of a quiet guy. Justin Clifton, he's more of a quiet guy. But those are leaders on the team. And so I think sometimes you're looking around waiting to see who's going to be that guy that jumps up and gets a hold of the team or gets a hold of some guys on the sideline and gets their attention. And that's one thing that I think has been a little bit different. But truthfully, too, and I think it's hard for people to hear because some people think it's an excuse, but this team does have a lot of youth to it. I mean, You just think about that senior class a year ago, and it's a who's who of Arkansas State football that you're talking about having to replace. And so especially you look on the defensive side of things, you're not seeing Javon Rowland-Jones, Kyle Wilson, Blaze Taylor,
right.
Nehemiah Wagner. You're not seeing those guys, D. Liner, and so I think the mentality has become, you look at recruiting, Arkansas State's always 1 or 2 in recruiting in the Sun Belt, and you see those classes come in, so you don't expect to see any downside at all. You think plug and play, like you're the Alabama of the Sun Belt Conference or something. It just doesn't work that way. It just does not work that way. And, to me, I think some guys are getting some what I like to call on-the-job training.
Yeah.
And on-the-job training just happens to happen on national television where everybody can see it. Any one of us have had new jobs, and we've got to learn behind the scenes, and so not in front of everybody. And I think that you're getting to see that. And I also think, too, that you got 6, 7, 8 weeks of film on teams, and you've got coaches on the other side that are being paid to beat you. And so they start finding these things and start seeing guys out of place on the defensive side or seeing some of the tendencies offensively, and that's what they're there to do. And I think that that's part of the problem.
You bring up an interesting point in terms of the recruiting. We know Arkansas State has kind of really, like you said, been at the top of the charts here. Would it be a thing, though, are some of these guys maybe not panning out the way that, and we know recruiting's not an exact science, but you look at App State, they're usually not up in that top 3. Georgia Southern, one of these teams where I think they've had one good class in terms of the rankings the past few years. Troy has been a team that, they bring in a lot of JUCO-type guys. Is this a thing where, again, maybe some scheme things aren't working, or what are you noticing it relates to the recruiting and also the results?
I think what it is, I heard you mention Marcel Murray. I mean, he went for the trifecta on Saturday. He's a guy, to be honest, that wasn't even highly touted in this recruiting class. I mean, everybody was talking about Donovan Marshall.
Yeah.
That's who everybody was talking about, who just happens to be pretty much redshirted, And so I think one thing that I always see, and it's not just Arkansas State, it's everywhere, that jump from high school to Division I, some guys handle it better than others. Some guys might take 3 years to make that move.
Right.
I know it's so easy for people to watch and just say, oh, man, this kid was a 3-star athlete. He was being recruited by this, and this. That doesn't matter. it really doesn't matter. I always refer to it as a learning curve. And I think some of the guys, the learning curve is a little bit different than others. And so a guy like Marcel Murray, I could tell within the first week of fall camp that this dude was going to be who this dude is. I mean, you could just see it. And then you see others, though, and you're looking at them and you're going, this is going to take a minute, And so if it was an area of need that Coach Anderson and his staff was recruiting, and it is taking them a little bit longer to gather their bearings, if you will,
right,
and pick up on the scheme and what their assignment is. I mean, that's the thing. You got 11 guys on the field at any given time. You have one of them miss an assignment, it can blow the whole play up.
Yeah, we saw plenty of that this past week. Now, let's get into this game. Now, I know you couldn't make it this week, and I know you're usually there, but hey, shouts out. Your daughter is a state champ in volleyball there, Jonesboro Rec and Shop. I want to say their 13th state title. Is that right?
Yeah, 13th in program history. They finished #1 overall in the state, and I'm very proud of those ladies to see from beginning to end. They had a lot of expectations on them. You know, a lot of people saying they wouldn't lose a match all season long. They only lost 3, but at the end of the day, they got it done in Hot Springs. So yeah, very proud.
Yeah, shouts out. So we'll let it slide for you on this one for not being down there in Louisiana. But
yeah, first one in a while. I haven't been there.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty good reason though. Kind of what was your take on this game? I mean, obviously this game is always a kind of a different beast on the schedule. I mean, neither road team wins, no matter how good or bad one team or the other is. You've been down there a few times. I mean, what is it about going down to Lafayette that this team just cannot seem to figure it out?
Well, and I think you would agree with this. It's a rivalry game. I mean,
Sure
you
is.
look back in the history of Arkansas State football, and, it's a top 3 rivalry with Arkansas State. And, it has been. I mean, in recent history, it's been the home team winning. And I referenced that on my show all week last week, that you can't assume anything in Lafayette. You just can't. And it does have a tendency to be a shootout. Haven't won there since 2012 with Coach Malzahn, and Arkansas State obliterated them on national TV that night, and they haven't forgotten. They haven't forgotten, and so it is odd. It is odd that it continues to happen. I will say some weird things always happen in that game. It's always feisty.
Yeah.
There have been multiple altercations that have been involved over the years there, and it almost feels like a mental thing. I mean, I remember the last time being there, and at the time Arkansas State was undefeated in conference, and you're looking at going undefeated because you're looking at a team in Lafayette that's, to be quite frank, struggling. And then, I'm doing post game and it's a loss. And so it's very weird. There's a long history between these two teams. But I knew this game would be dangerous because they do have the ability to score. Arkansas State does have the ability to score now. All we heard all season long was, when's the offense going to show up? When's the offense going to show up? Well, the last 2 weeks, the offense has shown up. The problem is that the defense through the last 6 quarters has been exposed, and it hasn't been very good, but you do have a lot of young guys out there learning on the job, and one missed assignment, you're looking at 3 explosive plays in the first quarter that you have given up. You don't want to give up 1 in a game, let alone 3 in a quarter, and that's what happened. And so it is. I think a lot of it goes to rivalry now, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but you mentioned the standings, and huge game this week. Lafayette's got to face Troy. And then I look at the last game for Lafayette. They're at Monroe. And speaking of rivalries, on the road, Monroe, Louisiana, there's no love lost between those two teams, and you never know.
That one tends to get weird, too. I guess,
Definitely.
yeah, and I guess, Joel, you mentioned the explosive plays, and it seems like this team, they're giving up their fair share, probably more so. But a lot of these big plays seem to be going for touchdowns. What have you just noticed in games that it just kind of seems like it's one of those weird anomalies on the year? And plus, too, like, teams are just running all over. As good as this defensive line is, they're the leaders in sacks, and they're right up there in terms of tackles for loss in the conference. But when you tend to get outside that box, when you get through, it's all over. What do you notice, and what seems to be the trend? What's your take?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah. Tackles for losses, sacks, it's almost like a jailbreak mentality. You know what I mean? You're going so hard for the quarterback that, you know, you sometimes leave yourself, numbers don't match up in the back end of the defense at that time. And so, you know, I will say this, going into the season, one of my biggest question marks was the back end of the defense.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I'll never single out players or anything like that, but some of the guys that you thought would be, you know, that you could rely on this year on the back end of the defense has had tough seasons, whether it's injuries or whatever. And so you are putting some youth out there, and you know, like I said, it doesn't matter what you did in high school. At Division I, you will be exposed, and you'll be exposed by the worst team in the country. It doesn't matter. It's the talent level is so vastly different than in high school, and but it does feel like that there's a lot of emphasis. And fans love sacks. Fans love players getting blown up behind the line of scrimmage. But at the same time, a lot of times if you don't get there, you're going to get exposed. And that feels like what has happened to me is that there is such an emphasis on getting in the backfield that you know, if you've got one guy left back there and he misses his assignment, there's nobody else there. And next thing you know, they're putting 6 on the board, and that has been what has happened over the last 6 quarters.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a feast or famine there for the defense.
Yes,
I guess offensively, things seem to be motoring. This is the offense that everybody's come to know and love. This is the offense we've been waiting for all season. Is this just a product of, okay, there's kind of starting to figure some things out? Obviously, we're starting to see a lot more Marcel Murray, which I am a firm believer in #FeedMurray. What have you noticed offensively that seems to be clicking now? Because you'd love to have seen some of these points against Lafayette, against, you know, your Georgia Southerns, against App State. You know, what's changed?
Well, and it's been an emphasis. One of the things I noticed that Coach Anderson has done is, you know, he simplified some things. You know, you think back, you mentioned Georgia Southern. You know, they had right at 500 yards of offense in that game.
Yeah.
You know, and the problem throughout the first part of the season was just not finishing. You know, you could rock between the 20s, but when it came to the red zone, you were having problems finishing. And Coach Anderson, you know, that was a point of emphasis, was to get these drives finished. And, you know, I remember last year the loss to MTSU in the Camellia Bowl, and one of the first things he told me was, we've got to get better running the football in the red zone. Well, insert Marcel Murray. Marcel Murray has been impressive. That's not taking anything away from Warren Wan or Armand Wewe or anybody else, but when you see a guy like this that has this type of explosiveness as a true freshman, it's hard to ignore. And he, to me, has made a huge difference in what this offense is doing.
Yeah.
He's able to pick up yards in chunks. He's able to finish off runs. And he's made a big difference. I think the offensive line has taken a little bit longer to come along. You got to think about it, man. I know it gets frustrating for the fans when you look at that offensive line, but 3 of the 5 starters on offense are really getting their first reps and their first starting reps at Division I, you know, and, you know, there's been an adjustment there. You know, they've inserted Clint Harvey into there in place of a redshirt freshman.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's been part of it too. Part of it is 3 of your 5 are pretty much getting their first starting reps at the college level, and they're getting, once again, like I hate to keep saying this, but on-the-job training. And so I think that's played a role. I think also when you look at the wide receiver core that we bragged about, I was guilty of that more than anybody, of how deep and loaded it was. But, you know, game 1 against SEMO, you lose Dahu Green. Dahu Green is arguably the best wide receiver in the conference, you know, and you lose him right out of the gate. You look at some of the other guys in the wide receiver core getting really their first real reps too. You know, I know, like, say Jay Adams, for instance, you know, he played some as a freshman, but the reality of it is he's a sophomore and he's getting more reps. You know, and so you look at him, and then, you know, Justin McKinnis coming in off of what was a really good year last year. Well, everybody knows who he is now. Yeah. You know, you have 800-plus yards. Guess what? Red flags go off, and people know who you are. And so I think it's just been it's really been a continuity thing. I think they just haven't been real consistent. You know, and now they're starting to find that consistency. Unfortunately, the consistency is being found after you've dropped some games. And so now you find yourself at 1-3 and you don't have any room for error at this point. I mean, you can still end up in that championship game on December 1st. You just need some help, but you got to take care of your own business.
Absolutely here. And I know in your show, and I'm sure you've seen some of the Twitter sphere noise and everything like that.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess, are people just, I don't want to say spoiled, but, you know, there's a new standard now, and it seems like people are upset, and this was a year where they were finally picked. This is a team that's been kind of slept on, and a lot of people feel that way for years, despite, you know, the one-and-done era where they were churning out conference titles. Are people well, I mean, they are overreacting, I think, a little bit. But kind of what's your take on the fan base as a whole and kind of that whole Blake's on the hot seat kind of thing?
I think, honestly, you know, I'm part of the problem. Other media is part of the problem. Coach Anderson would take part of the problem, you know, because of the hype.
Yeah.
Hype. You know, I've been engineering the hype train too. You know, and I think what it is the expectation level is probably the biggest. I would say that's the biggest demon for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Is we've heard all offseason how good this team's going to be. You know, I mean, when you're getting top 25 votes right out of the gate,
yeah.
You know, and you have Phil Steele giving you credit and props, and he's probably one of the best in the business when it comes to preseason magazines and setting the stage for a season. And when he's mentioning you, you know, that's a pretty big deal, but it's also part of the problem. And, you know, I think back to one of the things that Coach Anderson has always said to me in reference to new guys on the team, you know, say transfers that come in.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use Dahu Green as an example. Coach Anderson, one of the things he's learned as a head coach is, you know, everybody wants to talk to those guys when they get here.
Sure.
Because, oh, he's a transfer from Oklahoma, or, you know, Kirk Merritt, he's been to Texas A&M, he's been to Oregon. Everybody wants to talk to them. And, you know, one of the things that Coach Anderson said to me in the fall that really, really stood out to me is he said, JC, look, man, he said, you know what? Let's let these guys do something first. Let's let them earn some respect first, and then we'll let you talk to them. Because it's kind of like the hype and the buildup is so big for those guys that, you know, you're going to build them up into something that maybe they may never be. And so you want to see how it plays out first. Well, it's kind of the same aspect with this team. You know, all of us, myself included, I'm one of the worst, has built this team up to be, you know, a top 25 team that has underachieved. And so, you know, it does. It's the expectations to me is probably the biggest thing and the biggest issue that we have. I'm not saying you shouldn't have expectations, but maybe we just need to temper it some, because I kind of am of the belief now that special season is probably going to happen when we don't expect it.
Yep. So should be interesting going forward here. All right, let's jump ahead here now. Let's get to the opponent next week, South Alabama. I know a lot of Arkansas State fans are familiar with not only the Jags, but also head coach Steve Campbell. You might remember last time he played Arkansas State, he was with University of Central Arkansas. They knocked him off up there in Jonesboro. All right, so let's get to keys to the game there. Throw up that first one there for me, guys. And here's what we're looking at. There's a lot of different things that need to happen in this game. The first and foremost, D-line. Got to control not just the point of attack, but you really have to have the D-line sound in this one. Now, we know what this D-line is capable of in terms of all the statistics. You know, they forced 36 sacks on the season. That's a top 25 type of number. They've gotten a lot of tackles for loss. They're 33rd in the country. I guess, Joel, what do we have to see out of this D-line, in your opinion, in order to sort of really, really control this game on the defensive side?
Well, they're going to have to, and it sounds cliche, but you got to control the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
There's no question that the most powerful and most talented part of this defense is the defensive line, because they hit you with numbers. You know, they can rotate out 3-4 different lines on you, and they're going to have to control the line of scrimmage. You know, one of the things that I talked about, you know, early on in this season was the behind. You know, there were question marks at backer, at corner, and at safety, and the way that you can help control that, or the defensive line to control the game. And so, obviously if you're taking, 2 seconds to get to the quarterback, that 2 seconds is certainly going to help out a corner or safety back there on the back end trying to cover. And so I think it's important that they dictate and control the line of scrimmage early on and make things a little bit better on the back end. Obviously, Tajay Chambers has played really, really well at the linebacker position, but finding a combination next to him, you look at Trenton Ellis coming off injury. Bean is a true freshman. You just look at some of the other guys that are coming in there. They're going to have to raise their level of play too. But I think, again, you can make it easier on those guys in the back. They're still getting some on-the-job training. You can make it a lot easier for them if that defensive line gets physical and controls this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the South Alabama defense, too, no slouches either. They get to that quarterback as well. At least in terms of their offensive line. They've allowed 17 sacks on the air, and they allow a lot of tackles for loss. So this, you would think, would be kind of a field day for maybe that front seven. All right, one thing we also talked about a lot, explosive plays. Arkansas State has got to control them. Arkansas State has got to get them. Jags, one of these teams here, let me break down some numbers here for you because you guys know I love numbers here. Arkansas State, let me stick to South Al here. In terms of 10 or more yards, they're 87th in the country, and then it kind of drops off for the Jags from then on. They like those 20-yard plays for some reason. They're 20th in the country, but then in terms of 30 or more yards, they're down all the way down to 107. So it kind of it breaks off once you kind of get beyond that. But they tend to allow a lot of big ones too. 118 of 10 or more yards, and then so on and so forth. And they tend to allow a lot of really big-time plays. I guess, Joel, you kind of come in on both sides here. Offensively, we know what this offense is capable of in Arkansas State. Got to get those. But what does this defense really need to do to limit those big explosive plays?
Well, and I think there's a question at quarterback for South Al. I can tell you that, their starter's one with a concussion. I'm not sure that he's going to play. But, obviously, it's kind of like a snake. You chop the head off of the snake. You get to that quarterback position, and you're going to have to limit the amount of time that they have back there. But one of the things, too, I think that is so important is eye discipline, man.
Yeah.
I really think that we have been beat this year on, a lot. Everybody's doing a lot of RPOs, run pass options, and everybody's doing a lot of that. And to me, that is going to be imperative that, you keep an eye on where that football is, and we beat you. You look at run defense and doing very, very well, and stopping the big back in the backfield, and then next thing you know, boy, it's 67 yards gone, and those are things that you cannot have. I think that you've got to have. Almost a gang mentality. You need to swarm to the football and do it in bunches. Missed tackles has been a thing. Not wrapping up has been a thing. It's going to have to be one of those deals where you take the amount of time that quarterback has and you cut it in half, quick, fast, and in a hurry to make it more suitable on the back end of the defense, like I said earlier. But you got to find the tackling bunches. There needs to be a lot of swarming, and I think the real thing for this team is going to be start fast, put points on them fast, and I think Justice Hansen and this offense will have a field day against South Al. But defensively, you just got to stick to your assignments and just have good eye discipline, and I think the rest will take care of itself.
Absolutely here. All right, guys, throw up the next play with the next key there for us. Red zones. Oh, man. Well, third downs and red zones. Let me just kind of lump those two together here. Third downs. Seems Arkansas State has gotten better as the year goes on in terms of offensively converting a lot of those third downs. Doing so at still kind of low, but at a 38% clip, whereas earlier in the year they were closer to that 30% clip. However, they're allowing about 40% on those. But on the flip side, South Al only converting about 36%. So pretty similar in terms of that, but they are allowing only 32% of third downs to be converted, which puts them 20th in the 32% of third downs to be converted, which puts them 20th in the country. So I know you mentioned the big play capability from the offensive side against this defense, but that defense, it's kind of sneaky good, despite the fact that they tend to give up points. They're kind of good in their own right. It's a very odd sort of statistical anomaly.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that you always know about Alabama, I mean, Arkansas State figured it out again a year ago. They're always going to be fast. They're always going to be athletic, and they're super physical.
Yeah.
I mean, they are a physical team. They like to hit you. You know, it's just kind of who they've always been. I mean, heck, they're in Mobile. They don't have to go very far to recruit.
Sure don't.
The state of Alabama is a fertile recruiting ground, and they have horses. I mean, they have some athletes. And you know, you look at it, and they've been battling a lot of injuries themselves. You know, they're pretty beat up right now, but they're going in, they want their opportunity to shine. And you know, the reality of it is, we haven't really mentioned this, but when you're Arkansas State at this point, where you want Grant is you're going to get everybody's best. I mean, everybody's heard everything about Arkansas State, and teams and coaches, they get tired of hearing it. Honest, you know, and they want nothing more than to come in and smack Arkansas State in the mouth. That's just the way it is in the Sun Belt. You know, I've been to every media day in its existence, and you can tell. I've interviewed coaches and players, and you can just tell that Arkansas State is on everybody's list. You know, I mean, it just is. And you know, Coach Steve Campbell, you mentioned him. You know, the last time he was at Centennial Bank Stadium, UCA knocked off Arkansas State. Coach Campbell knows Coach Anderson very, very well. You know, and it's going to be a chess match. I don't think by any means it's going to be an easy game, because I don't recall since the moment that South Al came into the league that they've ever been an easy team to play. They've just never been an easy team to play. Even after making the jump to D1, they have not been an easy team to play. And I don't expect anything different on homecoming on Saturday, but it's really their physicality. They're such a physical team. And to be honest with you, they're a 2-win team right now that's trying to gain respect, and they're trying to find something to play for, you know, and the thing they have to play for right now is respect, and nothing would make them more happy than to come in on homecoming for Arkansas State and get a win.
Yeah, especially being that homecoming opponent, nothing to take too lightly. You also mentioned, or we mentioned the red zone. I think it's more or less having to put touchdowns on the board. In fact, for the year, Arkansas State, 22 of 26 in the red zone. Only 16 of those are touchdowns. South Alabama, 22 of 27. However, 19 of those are touchdowns. So they convert about the similar rate, but the Jags tend to put it in the end zone a lot more. In terms of red zones being allowed now, here's a real big key here. South Alabama, 33 of 35. So if you get in the red zone against the Jags, chances are you're scoring. They've allowed 25 touchdowns of those 33 scores. Arkansas State kind of on the flip side. Now, percentage-wise, it's fairly similar, 20 of 25. But as you can see there, the numbers not near as many opportunities or scores allowed, allowing 17 touchdowns. So kind of another one of those things where if you get in the red zone against Arkansas State, chances are you punch it in, but they just don't allow people into the end zone as much. And for Arkansas State, that puts them at 36th in the country in terms of touchdowns allowed in the red zone. So I know this has been a big point of emphasis for this team. They've mentioned it time and time again in terms of not only wanting to run the ball, but running the ball in the red zone, because it's a lot harder to pass just with the fact that there's just not as much space. So what do you think of that statistical, I guess, category for this game, Joel?
Well, and I think, you know, obviously you look at those numbers, and that's season long. Well, I think we all know that the offense was struggling early on. You know, I would say the last 2 weeks they really started to put it together.
Yeah, it's been clicking.
Different team in the red zone now.
Yeah.
You know, I think they're a different team now, you know. And again, I hate to keep saying this because Coach Hampton would kill me, but Marcel Murray. I mean, you know, that guy he's somebody that you have to account for in the red zone. And I think he's going to start to garner more and more attention, which is going to set up Justice to find, you know, his receivers in the end zone. And, you know, I think if you look over the last 2 weeks, you start looking at those red zone numbers, they start to tell a more true story than the ones do for the entire season. I think they're getting to the point where they're starting to feel a lot more comfortable in the red zone, and they're going to find the end zone more times than not. And another thing too, I didn't even mention this, but you know, Blake Grupe. You know, he to me has taken that kicking job and ran with it. And, so you don't feel as if when you get in the red zone that you necessarily have to have a touchdown because you're like, man, I'm not sure we can kick it from 38. Look, you feel pretty confident when he goes out there that he can get you some points. And so I think that changes the play calling a little bit too for Coach Anderson is that, you want to get 6. Everybody always wants to get 6.
Yeah.
But if you don't, you know that you can run a guy out there who's been pretty reliable, all things considered.
And I guess our last key here, and you kind of alluded on this, is Evan Orth, their quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of up in the air. We're not totally sure with him, but we'll just assume that he's playing here. Gots to contain.
I would be very surprised if he plays.
Yeah, so that one will be interesting here. As of now, we hadn't seen anything official, but you contain that guy if he happens to be in the game. But also another guy you got to contain is Jamarius Way, number 1 wide receiver in the belt. He's got 77 yards a game. He gets the ball thrown to him a lot, and I'm going to be real interested to see that Way and Jerry Jacobs matchup because Jerry Jacobs probably one of the top cornerbacks in the Sun Belt as well. What do you think of that? And even, we'll kind of set up both scenarios here for quarterback here with Orth or their backup, but also having to contain Jamarius Way as well.
Well, and you said it. You're right on the money. It's Jerry Jacobs' job. And, speaking of guys that have emerged, Jerry Jacobs is without a shadow of a doubt the best corner on this Arkansas State team, and if not, top 3 corner league. He has settled in. He is, the evolution of Jerry Jacobs from the time he arrived through fall camp, a lot of it has been maturity. A lot of it has been, just a personal maturity. He was, and Coach Anderson will tell you this, it was a little difficult at first. But they've all kind of figured each other out, and he's been special. I mean, he has been really, really good. And that's going to be it right there. I mean, Jerry will take that challenge on head on, but it kind of reflects back to what we talked about too. We need that defensive one to cut that cover time down. And so that's going to be the key, get that pressure up front from the D-line, and Jerry will take care of the rest. I'm not saying that Way won't get some catches and won't have some special moments. Jerry Jacobs is really, really good. He's really, really good, and he's going to have a big game that day against Sam. It could be a long day if you're giving him the opportunity to get in the end zone. But I'm going to put my money on Jacobs.
Absolutely, and also too, if you're that defensive line, you're dealing with a backup quarterback. I think you just throw the kitchen sink at him personally.
Well, and you got to be careful. You got to be careful with that because Coach Campbell is extremely intelligent, and he's going to game plan on that. If you're looking at the fact that Orth is out, and I believe he will be out, he's going to game plan for that because he knows what Arkansas State's going to counter with. They're going to counter with a lot of pressure and try to get them rattled. And they'll counter with some quick bubble screens or maybe just some screens drop down to the running back. They'll do some things that you don't want to load up, and you have 7 guys running. You know what I mean? And then next thing you know, somebody squirts out and they're gone for 60 again. You still have to be careful and be cognizant of what's going on the field. But no, Jerry Jacobs on Way, defensive line, definitely. But if you do have your backup quarterback in, any times in football, I don't care what level, you see a backup quarterback come in and next thing you know, you're like, man, they passed for 250 and 3 touchdowns. What in the world? How are they the backup? A lot of it is you don't know their tendencies.
Right.
You haven't seen a lot from them, and some people are just gamers. They take that challenge on, so you still got to be careful. It's not a guarantee.
Absolutely. A couple other key players here for South Al. Jalen Thompson, one of their defensive backs, tied for second, also with Jerry Jacobs there in terms of passes defended. I believe Jacobs has more interceptions than does Thompson, but obviously, the likes of Justin McKenna is probably going to be on hand. And then also Trey Minter, their running back, okay statistically, not the worst running back out there, but he is probably the best returner this year in the Sun Belt. Guy has about 26 or more yards per return. So a couple other guys that you really got to focus on.
Yeah, there's no question. And, you mentioned Justin McKenna, and, Arkansas State, unfortunately, that receiving corps was so loaded to start the year. Injuries have decimated it. You know, I mean, you look at, I mentioned losing Dahu, you've lost Brandon Bowling. Kendrick Edwards has missed a significant amount of time. Jay Adams has been hobbled as well. You know, Bubba Agbabor has been beat up a little bit. And so you look at that and it's like, man, you know, what was one of the strengths of this team is now, you know, average as far as numbers go. And so, obviously, quarterback Justice Hampton, one of the things he's really good at is he football. You know, a year ago, he was bad about, you know, receptions tied up. Now, he has had that again this year, but he's been much better about securing the ball. So if he's looking and McInnes is covered by Thompson and Thompson's got good coverage, Justice is going to generally get the football to where the defense lends itself. He's going to find the open man is normally what he's really good about. Now, he and Justin do have great chemistry, and he does give some 50-50 balls to him because he knows he'll go up and get them. But you got to be careful there. Now, and you mentioned Mentor in the return game. You know, I feel as if Arkansas State special teams-wise has been much better. They've been much
a lot
better
cleaner,
than a year ago. And, you know, and special teams is something that always goes sometimes unnoticed.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. You know, people notice it when there's 3 seconds left and you got to hit a 45-yard field goal to win the game, and then everybody all of a sudden says about special teams. But it's been much cleaner. They will be very aware. They face some dynamic return men. Alabama, they got some pretty dynamic return men there, but they've seen some really good ones. And so, you know, I think that obviously the planning throughout the week, they will pay special attention to Mr. Mentor on the back end. And, you know, that's certainly something that you don't want to look up and, you know, you've given up 7 due to special teams. You can't afford that. You can't afford that. And this is a game that you're going to be heavily favored in.
Yeah.
And you've got to perform well in all 3 aspects. And they've really only done that in one game. And I say one game loosely, and that was the Georgia State game.
Right.
Because I felt like the defense in the second half gave up too much. But that is the closest they played to a complete game. This week needs to be a complete game.
Absolutely. And I guess quickly, what do you know the latest on Kendrick Edwards? Are we going to see him playing in this one? And if he does play, kind of have maybe a little bit of a role in this one?
I would anticipate him to play. Honestly, I'll say this, and I'm not going to divulge too much information, but
sure.
There was at practice, when I was at practice this week, you had 8 guys in red. And when I say 8 guys in red that play. I'm not talking about just 8 guys who play.
Right.
And so that's not something you want to see. But this team is pretty beat up. I mean, they are pretty beat up. Now, with that being said, I think they're going to be okay. I think they'll be okay. I don't think it's anything that's really going to cost playing time, but it is costing practice time right now. But this team is really, really beat up at the moment. And so it's certainly something to keep an eye on because some guys, and of course, at any team, any level, any conference, most people aren't 100% this time of year. I mean, you're going into game 5 of conference play. Most people aren't 100%, but it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on the health of both of these teams because they're both coming into this game pretty beat up.
Yeah, no, it's always a dogfight in this conference. I don't care what anybody says. This conference has been known to slug it out. All right, let's get to some things off the gridiron here because we're starting to get into some other things, some big things going on here. Throw them up there for me, guys. Head golf coach Mike Hagan. We've been talking about this guy all year. Is now an inductee into the 2018 Golf Coaches Hall of Fame. He did big work when he was in the junior college ranks, and he's done nothing but splendid things since he's been to Arkansas State. He is being rewarded for that. The soccer team, lost this past week in the Sun Belt tournament, and unfortunately for them, to Little Rock. So it's bad enough you lose. It's even worse if you lose to them. It was a 1-1 tie heading into overtime. Little Rock ends up winning in PKs 4-3. The women's cross country team finished 3rd. The men 8th. They've got the South Central Regional. I forget kind of how they do that. Coming up here in the next week. Bowling back at it. Got 6th in the Bearcat Open. And basketball is back. Women had their first game. They played UA Fort Smith. Got to 100. So offense is rolling for them. 100-73. Men will tip off on Sunday versus Lyon, and then the women will play UAM on Monday. So we'll get your take here, JC, on a couple of those things here. Mike Hagan, man, he's been in here, picked up right where he left off at the junior college ranks.
No, he's incredible. I mean, Arkansas State has a top 25 golf program.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just let that marinate for a minute. He's incredible, man. When you get a chance to talk to Coach Hagan, you can tell the game of golf consumes him. I mean, it absolutely consumes him. And what he's done with this program is nothing short of amazing. In the amount of time that he's done it. He is so respected around the country, and obviously you see this with this Hall of Fame nomination for him. But he's incredible, man, and he is one of those guys. He is a Terry Mohajir guy. When you talk to Coach Hagan, confidence exudes. I mean, it just exudes from him. You know, he doesn't believe there's any reason why Arkansas State can't be one of the top programs in the whole country. That's just that's kind of the mentality he's had since he's gotten here. And now look up, and in this short amount of time, they're a top 25 program now, and they're doing things that haven't ever been done in the history of this program. And you know, as long as Coach Hagan's here, I'm going to tell you, he's going to continue to build this thing, and he's going to do it the right way. And it's in really, really good shape. Yeah,
it's fantastic to see how quickly that team has ascended here. And kind of a note there, and in the graphic you see bowling. That should be bowling, just for the record. I can't spell. So, but also basketball. Let's touch on them quickly. I know we talked with Matt Stoltz last week about what we can expect out of this team. Just from what you've been able to not only talk with both coaches, but what you've seen in practice, what do you expect out of both of these teams, both men and women?
Well, let's start with the women first, since they've already got an exhibition game under their belt. And, you know, I was there, and I'll tell you, you know, of course, you look on the bench, you have 4 or 5 girls in street clothes at that moment. And, you know, it's exhibition, and so you got to take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
But 3 freshmen for Coach Boyer that just, you know, Jordan Elder, you see her, Trinity Jackson was outstanding, Jaira Washington. I mean, you look at those young ladies alone, and I was just interested to see what they brought to the table. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you always look, and one of the things that some coaches I've always talked to, they say, you know, you want to look and make sure that they don't stand out. Like, you don't want them to stand out as freshmen in regards to they look like they're out of place.
Right.
None of them looked out of place. They looked outstanding. Coach Boyer is going to have the opportunity to have some really good depth this year. He's going to be able to play some good amount of numbers, and that was one thing that I talked to Acacia Westbrook about in the post game following their win over UAFS was, is it going to be nice to actually get to hit the bench every now and then instead of playing 37, 38, 39, 40 minutes a game.
Right.
And she just shook her head and was like, absolutely. You know, I mean, so it's not going to wear her down, you know, and by the end of the season, she's not going to be spent. And, you know, Morgan Wallace, she was hurt a little bit last year. She looked really good. You know, there's some really good opportunities. The frenetic pace that they're going to be able to play at with the speed of that team is going to be something to watch. Of course, they like to get in you on the defensive end.
Yeah.
And, you know, this was a game where it was 40-39 at the half. And, you know, everybody's kind of looking around going, you know, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Granted, that's a 20-win team from a year ago in UAFS. But a 60-point second half for the ladies, and they hit the century mark. They put up 100 points in 40 minutes on the women's side in basketball.
That's impressive.
It wasn't that they did it against a bad team, because that team's not bad.
Right.
UAFS is not bad. They just had really great offensive sets. They're best when they get out and they get out and they run. That's when they're at their best. And man, it's just kind of a sneak peek. But you know, obviously it's going to be a season in progress. We'll see how it goes. But you like what you see early on. As far as Coach Bellotto and the men, the culture. The culture is the one thing that has really stood out to me. I was at a lot of practices a year ago. I've been at several already this year. And it's just, you know, last year I felt like when I walked in to practice, you could cut the air with a knife.
Yeah, it was tense at times, yeah.
It did. It felt tense a lot. And you had some personalities last year that aren't here now, that, you know, it didn't necessarily mesh all the time.
Right.
And it feels like now when you walk in that everybody meshes. You know, I can tell you when I was at the women's game, there was 4 guys from the team sitting together, just hanging out. You know, you just see them when you see the members of the men's basketball team. They're normally with other guys from the team, whether it's one or two of them, 3 or 4 of them. They're always together, and you can kind of tell that there's a genuine love for each other with this team, and I think that can go a long way.
Absolutely. So we'll see if they can put that to the test. They say wolves roam in packs, so I guess they're adhering to that already. So I think too, with his style of offense, I think it's really going to play into a lot better with some guys who are more his type of guys. You know, they've gotten bigger, they've gotten more athletic, I think, than maybe even the past couple of years. Safe to say.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And, you know, that's the key. You mentioned it. Guys that are going to actually fit his system is a big thing. Yeah. You know, it's the old square peg, round hole. You know, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And the other thing, too, you know, we can talk scheme and who's going to fit in schematically, but who fits his coaching style? Coach Bellotto is very much a no-nonsense guy. I mean, he's a no-nonsense
He does
coach.
not play that.
He's not going to let it slide. And it's going to be his way. You're going to do it how he wants. He's going to love you the same no matter what. Yeah. But he has expectations of you. And if you don't meet them, you won't play. I mean, and it doesn't matter. He proved it a year ago. I mean, when he sat his best player and he removed his best player from the team, he showed you quick, fast, and in a hurry. And one of the things that he and I talked about is that's building the culture. You know, if you're willing to get rid of your best player, then what does that tell somebody that's not? Yeah. That you two are expendable. And so he's doing it the right way. I know everybody's got expectations. Right. And, you know, this is a basketball community in Northeast Arkansas too. But I have full confidence that you'll see an improvement over a year ago. What that will be, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure that anybody knows at this point. Yeah. Because you've got a lot of youth on this team too, and a lot of guys figuring it out. But I will say this: I'm confident enough to say that I believe that it'll be much improved over a year ago. I'm
right there with you here, JC. My man's from the RWRC, the Red Wolf Roll Call up there in Northeast Arkansas. My man, where can the people find you? Get some more of your hot takes.
Absolutely. Of course, I'm on ESPN Jonesboro 92.7 Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. Also on Ritter Communications Tubetown Channel 21 on cable there. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at JC_RWRC. Also on Facebook as well. We also are on Facebook Live with our show every day also. And so we're pretty much easy to find. You just search RWRC and you're going to find us pretty easily. I'm a big fan of the show. Send our regards to Wallace. I know it's probably late in the day for him because, you know, he's an old fella. So pass that along. Yeah. He had a heated tapioca wrestling match last night at the home. So this guy, he's probably a little sore today. But absolutely. That's all right. Got to ice down, man. All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, JC, I thank you, brother. We'll definitely get you back in here again once basketball season gets rolling along here. Appreciate you coming on, brother. Man, I appreciate you guys. All right. Well, that is it, my folks. Wolves Den, big-time game coming up here against South Alabama. Basketball season finally getting into the swing of things, so we'll start talking about them a lot more. Some of these other fall sports have kind of started to wind up here. We'll keep you updated on the cross-country team, golf, all that kind of good stuff here. All right, that is it. Hopefully next week we will have some better news for you. Make sure you get up there into Jonesboro. It's homecoming. I unfortunately can't make it because I'm working and stuff, so you know how that goes. But if I wasn't, you better believe I'd be up there. So make sure you guys get up there, support the team, all that kind of good stuff here. And like I said, hopefully next week we'll have a much better report for you for the show here. All right, that'll do us for all the cast and crew and everybody here from the Wolves Den. We will see you guys next week.